King George V-class battleships were a significant class of warships built for the British Royal Navy just before and during the early stages of World War II. This class was named after King George V, who reigned over the United Kingdom and the British Empire from 1910 to 1936. The development of these battleships was deeply influenced by the strategic realities of the interwar period, the constraints of international treaties, and the changing nature of naval warfare. Background and treaty constraints. The origins of the King George V class lie in the complex geopolitical landscape of the 1920s and 1930s. Following World War I, nations sought to limit the growth of naval armaments through a series of treaties, most notably the Washington Naval Treaty of 1922 and the London Naval Treaty of 1930. These agreements were intended to prevent an arms race similar to the one that had occurred before the Great War. Consequently, the Royal Navy, like other major naval powers, was forced to work within stringent design limitations. One of the key limitations of these treaties was a restriction on the size and armament of capital ships. The Washington Treaty set a maximum displacement of 35,000 tons and capped the caliber of main guns at 16 inches. However, due to rising tensions in the 1930s and Japan's refusal to abide by treaty terms, the London Naval Treaty reduced the maximum gun caliber to 14 inches in an effort to curb the naval arms race, design philosophy, and political considerations. In the mid-1930s, when planning began for the new class of battleships, the Royal Navy faced a dilemma. It was clear that the new ships would need to balance firepower, protection, and speed, but treaty restrictions complicated the design process. The first Sea Lord, Admiral Sir Ernley Chatfield, was a major advocate for adhering to treaty restrictions, hoping to maintain international diplomatic stability. As a result, the King George V-class battleships were designed with 14-inch guns to comply with the treaty limits, despite internal debates about whether to build with 16-inch guns to match the firepower of potential adversaries. The final design included 10 14-inch guns, arranged in 2 quadruple turrets forward and a single twin turret aft. The quadruple turret design was chosen to concentrate firepower, although it introduced significant engineering challenges and maintenance complexities. The secondary armament consisted of 5.25-inch dual-purpose guns intended to provide both anti-ship and anti-aircraft capability, and extensive anti-aircraft weaponry was added to address the growing threat from air attacks, construction, and characteristics. 5 ships of the King George V class were built: King George V, Prince of Wales, Duke of York, Anson, and Howe. Construction of the first ship, HMS King George V, began in 1937, and the class was completed between 1940 and 1942. These battleships were characterized by their relatively compact size compared to other contemporary battleships, with a standard displacement of around 42,000 tons when fully loaded, significantly exceeding the treaty limit due to wartime modifications. They were heavily armored, with a thick belt and deck armor designed to withstand hits from enemy shells and bombs. Their top speed of 28 knots was facilitated by powerful steam turbines, making them fast enough to escort aircraft carriers and chase enemy capital ships. The King George V class featured a distinct silhouette due to the unusual arrangement of its main turrets. The bow-mounted quadruple turrets gave the ships a high forward superstructure, while the single twin turret aft resulted in a unique profile. This arrangement was intended to optimize forward firepower for engagements, a design choice reflecting the Royal Navy's tactical emphasis on concentration of fire. Operational history. The operational history of the King George V-class battleships was distinguished by both successes and controversies. The most famous ship in the class, Prince of Wales, played a pivotal role in the destruction of the German battleship Bismarck. In May 1941, Prince of Wales, alongside the battlecruiser Hood, engaged the Bismarck and the heavy cruiser Prince Eugen. During this engagement, Hood was tragically sunk, but Prince of Wales scored critical hits on the Bismarck, damaging its fuel tanks and forcing the German battleship to attempt a retreat. A few days later, King George V, along with the battleship Rodney, cornered and destroyed the Bismarck in one of the most famous naval battles of the war. However, Prince of Wales met a tragic fate herself. In December 1941, she was sent to Singapore to counter Japanese aggression in the Pacific. Alongside the battlecruiser Repulse, she was caught by Japanese bombers and torpedo planes off the coast of Malaya. Both ships were sunk, marking the first time in history that capital ships at sea were destroyed solely by air power, demonstrating the vulnerability of even the most modern battleships to aerial attack. The remaining ships of the class, Duke of York, Anson, and Howe, served throughout the war, providing convoy escort, shore bombardment, and fleet support. Duke of York was involved in the sinking of the German battleship Scharnhorst in the Battle of North Cape in 1943, a night action where the British ships used radar-directed fire to great effect. Post-war fate and legacy. After World War II, the King George V-class battleships quickly became obsolete due to the advent of air power and missile technology. By the 1950s, these ships were relegated to reserve status or used for training. HMS King George V and her sisters were all decommissioned and scrapped by the late 1950s. Despite their relatively short operational careers, the King George V-class battleships represented a turning point in naval design and tactics. They were the last generation of British battleships to be built, marking the end of an era for the Royal Navy. Their service highlighted the transition from traditional naval engagements dominated by battleships to a new age where aircraft carriers and submarines took center stage. Evaluation. The King George V-class battleships were controversial in their time, criticized for their smaller main battery when compared to their American and Japanese contemporaries. However, they were highly regarded for their resilience, protection, and speed. Their successes in the Atlantic and the Arctic convoys, as well as their role in major naval battles, cemented their place in naval history. In retrospect, these ships were a product of the interwar constraints and the strategic needs of the Royal Navy. They balanced firepower and protection in a way that made them capable of engaging the best of the Kriegsmarine, while also being able to operate effectively in a variety of roles. As such, the King George V class stands as a testament to British naval engineering and the complexities of battleship design in the twilight of the battleship era.